everybody. My name is Leila Sidi from TunaTone Instruments, and today I have Max Heidemann joining me from Germany. We're going to talk about this joint project we've been working on for 2 or so years, building a proprietary TunaTone vibrato system.
Yeah.
Max, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, I'm Max Heidemann from Germany, and by profession, I'm a mechanical engineer, but I also do some guitar building as well myself. And basically from the get-go, I've always been a big admirer of Leila and her work. And maybe we should start talking about how this all came to be, right? Because like we're living on opposite sides of the globe. So one day on Instagram, I think it happened, you were doing like a Q&A in your Instagram story, right? And somebody asked you, is there anything you really want to try in your guitars that you hadn't had a chance to try yet? And you posted your answer like, yes, I would love to develop a vibrato system for my instruments. And me reading that, I basically just came from collaborating with Nicolas Shaw from Berlin on a vibrato system for his guitars. Like we custom designed and built a system, and I helped him do the calculations and everything. And I thought to myself, wow, maybe I should just text her. So I ended up messaging Leila, and that's how we got to know each other, right?
Yeah. It started over Instagram with this nice message from Max saying that that he had just helped Nikolai sort of do some work on the Shore Guitars vibrato system, and that he'd be happy to talk to me about it anytime. And I said, oh, how about now? So we just started the conversation right then, and Max and I have never met in person. We've just been sending each other messages and photographs and voice notes and video chatting for 2 years, getting to know each other and kind of jointly sort of developing this vibrato system. And when I say jointly, I guess I mean I've been around for the process, but the vast majority of the engineering, the math, all that kind of stuff has been Max. And yeah.
Certainly a part of it. But to be clear, the main idea of the system, we're going to get into it soon, but the general concept of what differentiates it from existing vibrato systems and why you wanted to come up with this in the first place, the idea was there from the get-go on your side. I think that's one of the first things I asked you. Hey, what do you have in mind and why don't you use a commercial system? But of course, I would love to help you work on a custom one. And you right away had this amazing idea, right?
Yeah, and that idea came from a couple of different places. I do the sort of two-dimensional kind of aesthetic design of my guitars with my friend Aaron Parker. We had been talking about sort of vibrato systems and this kind of thing, but my other job outside of building guitars is that I work as an occupational therapist, which means that I'm often thinking about ergonomics in my instruments, like even in my sort of base model design, I'm thinking about ergonomics in terms of building guitars that are lightweight, that are just have, the geometry of a fast guitar, an easily playable guitar, especially for people who are kind of small of hand or small of stature. And so as a non-guitar player myself, I had noticed that oftentimes when people are kind of playing a guitar like a hardtail versus a vibrato, there's this bar that you kind of have to hang on to or grab for as you're playing. And that the change in playing style or hand position was kind of curious to me. And at the same time, Aaron Parker, my friend, and I were kind of talking about what are different ways that vibratos could be actuated, or what are different, how many different ways can they work? And so this sort of idea of a palm actuated vibrato system kind of came out of those conversations. And that's what I sort of brought to Max, was like, would it be possible to design something where you're not hanging onto a bar, grabbing for something or changing your hand position, but rather using your same hand position and still being able to change the pitch. And I also wanted it to sort of work with my my current bridge, which is also like a handmade bridge and not something commercially available, that kind of like a roller bridge um, or like a rocking bridge.
Totally. So when you explained this to me, I fell in love with the idea immediately, because sure, on the one hand side, the concept of the vibrato system is not changed. You have your string tension, you lower it and it lowers the pitch of the guitar, and you can do some nice effects with it, right? But just the concept of altering this one little piece, like getting rid of the handlebar you usually have. And when, for example, when you're finger picking and you want to do the right, you have to totally change your hand position to grab the bar. Some people have it in their hands while they play, but the bar can be pretty high above the strings on some guitars. And for certain playing styles, I thought, wow, this is genius. How come nobody came up with that before? Maybe they did, we don't know at that point. So yeah, for sure, we went straight into researching it. And I thought, I said to you, I'm pretty sure we can make this happen. It's going to take a little bit of time and some development effort, and for sure we'll have to build the one or the other prototype before we can make it work, right? In the end, there you can do only so much on paper. You have to build a physical thing to see the effects of what you just came up with, and then further iterate. And that's why it took us quite a while. But yeah, you already mentioned that we're talking about the palm actuated vibrato system. So since you have the guitar on the wall there behind you, what if you just show what we're talking about here?
Absolutely. I'll be right back. So this is it here. And basically, it sort of allows, it's just behind the bridge, and it basically allows a hand position, you know, similar to this, strumming or picking. And then the palm can just kind of push it down and actuate it, or you can hook your finger around the edge and lift it as well. So it actually works in both directions if you want it to.
Yeah, so maybe you can show it from like the side. The wooden piece there, it's like hovering over the strings. Exactly, there's some clearance between it. And the idea is mainly you press down on this. It's set up as a floating system at the moment, so you can go like in both directions. Then again, of course, we tried to mirror some design elements you already had in your guitar, in your model. Mainly that's like your handmade brass parts you're using. You have that at the nut and of course at the bridge there, this big monolithic bridge. And we try to incorporate these design elements by having like brass pieces in the system as well. For example, like the main block where you anchor the strings in is brass too. And then you have like this beautiful wooden piece where you rest your palm on.
I'd love to know, Max, I'd love to know more about, you know, you sort of described starting things on paper and then moving into the realm of prototyping in person. And I'd love to hear from you about the things that you had to consider when designing this vibrato on paper.
Yeah, well, first of all, of course, I had to ask you like a million questions. I had to, I tried to get to know your guitar as well as I could, sadly, without physically holding it in my hands. That's one of the big problems of working far apart. But you sent me lots of drawings and pictures, and I had you take like a million measurements on all different edges of your guitar, so I could come up with a clear set of drawings on my own. Because, like you say, if I design on paper or on a computer, whatever, first of all, I need to have I set my boundaries and need this framework of measurements to work within. You told me you have like the scale length you're offering, the certain string gauge you're using. And in the end, I can calculate like a tension on your strings. And this is my main starting value. From there on, I start working towards that. I started to simplify the problem for me, like to break it down as far as I could and then build it back up. That's like my philosophy of designing stuff like that. So in the end, what's the simplest like picture you can have in your mind for a vibrato system? It's probably a seesaw. Is that what it's called? Like the children's toy where yeah, exactly. It's pretty much like a balance or like a seesaw. And on the one hand side, you have your strings pulling on there with lots of force. That means like you would have like the big kid on the one side of the seesaw and it would like just tip over. Of course, you need like a balancing force on the other side, and that will be provided by a spring. And all I have to do is balance these two forces out so that in the end the system is like in a floating equilibrium position in the center, right? And of course, there's a bunch of math and geometry involved in there. And to be honest, it took us quite a few tries to get like the feeling just right, because you don't want it to feel too soft, too hard. The range has to be usable. For like the music we had in mind or we intended for this instrument, we want like a certain range of motion for the system. And all of these factors combined with like the geometry of your guitar, it has to fit on the guitar. It shouldn't be like a massive thing that doesn't fit on your body and stuff like that. Yeah, it all came out to, in the end, requiring, I think we went to version 7.2, if I'm not mistaken. So
7.2 is the last
quite a few versions of that. And in the end, we came up with a system. I have like one here that's not in the guitar at the moment. So you can see you have like the wooden handlebar here as well, the brass blocks, stainless steel sides and base plate. And on the bottom, you have like this one big spring there. And this is what's providing all the force to counteract the string tension. And in the end, I didn't get too far on paper. I wound up using my CAD system and doing fancy drawings. And then, yeah, the next big problem was making the parts, right?
Yeah, so the first prototype, or the prototype you sent me in the mail, the first prototype you sent me in the mail was one that you handmade. We didn't use stainless steel at all. We used aluminum, and you handmade it in your shop and sent it to me. And then I made a prototype body, not this one, but I made a prototype body out of a 2x4 and bolted it together and attached the prototype sort of aluminum system with one of my necks that I borrowed from a different guitar, and just sort of passed it around to community here. I kind of saw how it worked in real life with my actual neck and the dimensions of my body and bridge and neck pocket. And then I passed it around to a few friends, musicians that I really trust, including my friend Erin, who I mentioned earlier, and my roommate Cass, who's also a shredder. And I received feedback from them about actuation, what it sort of felt like. One of the goals was to not have to work too hard to actuate the vibrato. Thinking about it in ergonomic terms, I sort of mentioned to Max that I'd like it to be actuated, simply and easily. But in the first prototype, I received feedback that it might be a little bit too easy, that it might, that even just touching it might sort of change the pitch. And so what we did was Max ended up sort of reducing the length of the bar to offer a little bit more tension, I guess, in its when you press down. And that allowed a little bit more room behind the bridge as well. And the other design element that came out of that sort of trial was around the first prototype, or that particular version. It didn't have a locking system. It was always kind of floating. But Max ended up actually designing a locking system on the vibrato after. So there is a way to lock it so that you can rest your hand on the palm piece and it won't change the pitch of the strings at all.
Exactly. We thought this would be like a big improvement in usability in general, since you can, without any tools, it just has like a knurled little thumb wheel on there. And all you have to do is like loosen it quarter turn, put it in lock position and tighten it again. And then the unit is exactly like any hardtail on any guitar. You can like break a string, it will not mess with the tuning. You can even use it as like a comfortable hand rest, like you mentioned there. So if you choose you won't use it on a particular song or when you're recording something or whatever, you totally have the option to just block it and it won't affect your tuning at all. Like you mentioned, we had to do some modifications in the geometry. First of all, to get like the feeling for the player right, so it doesn't feel too soft or too stiff. And that, of course, may require many more changes in the geometry. Most of them you don't even notice because they're like increments of a millimeter, changes here and there in like the leverage arms. And in the end, we went through like a bunch of different springs to find the right one we need. we basically became like pen pals for mechanical parts, and we sent each other springs and hardware and screws and sheet metal stuff and brass parts.
It's so true. In addition to yeah, in addition to all the rest of our correspondence.
Yeah, and like you touched upon, the first real proof of concept prototype of the like more or less final design. I built some weird stuff before, but the first thing that looked like the final system, I made that by hand, just out of stuff I had lying around, aluminum parts, stuff like that. And that's what I sent over to you and what you put on your prototype body to like validify the thing. But then, of course, came the issue of how are we going to do it for the final guitar. We toyed around with the idea of having the parts made by you by hand to fit in with the scheme of all the handmade parts you put on your guitar. Because, of course, you don't just buy any off-the-shelf bridge and put it on your body. You make all those parts meticulously by hand. And we thought, first of all, it would feel wrong to put on like an off-the-shelf unit on your guitar. It needs to fit in with the overall aesthetic and how you make your instruments. And so, of course, we thought about hand making the vibrato unit. And I tried to keep my design in line with that. So most of the parts in design are intended to be made by hand. Then we started like listening around, or basically you started seeing if there's other options available. In the end, it came down to have sheet metal parts from stainless steel, cut out and band, right? And of course, we needed brass parts too, and those are going to be like milling operations. And so that's pretty much where you met some amazing people, right?
Yeah, so I ended up working with James Rodman in Texas. I sent him drawings that Max had made for the string block, which is this piece here and this piece as well. And I sent the drawings to a few different really amazing craftspeople. But James was able to. He has such an amazing shop. I'd love to visit it in person one day. But he has just like an amazing milling setup, and so he was able to make them so beautifully. And I think, you know, more accurately than I'd be able to do in my woodworking shop here. So, so that was kind of like a end of the project kind of collaboration, was being able to work with Jamie around that.
Oh yeah. And for the steel, stainless steel parts, you found a local place who did it for you, right?
Yeah, that's right. A local metalworking place, and now they make like all the, you know, all of these things, including like
Right.
the neck plates and hardtail
Right.
tail pieces and that sort of thing too, which is really nice.
So in the end, it turned out to be quite a global guitar, right?
Yes.
Some German drawings milled in Texas and put on a Canadian guitar.
So, Max, as we sort of come, you know, come close to the end of our conversation, I guess I have one question, which is, or I have two questions. My first question is, um, did you have a favorite part and a least favorite part in this design process?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. I think I have to start with my least favorite part. I think my least favorite part is just the frustration of of not having like your guitar physically, and like the long distancing thing is great with technology and everything, but it can be frustrating at times, and like waiting for delivery of parts. And of course we did it all in the like pandemic times, where like deliveries took forever, and like the shipping companies were basically threatening us of like, hey, we're going to put this on a ship instead of an airplane, and you have to wait like 3 months for the parts to arrive. And that could be kind of nerve-wracking. But that sort of like leads into my most favorite part, and that is, it sounds cheesy maybe, but it's like getting to know you. And like I think I really found a friend in you in this process, and talking about nerdy stuff all day long, Skyping for hours, discussing guitar stuff and every other thing you could possibly imagine, was definitely one of my favorite parts.
Same here. That's my favorite part for sure, is just our friendship, just the
Yeah,
development of our friendship with this shared project. But, you know, now when we're on a phone call, you know, we'll talk about this vibrato system for maybe 25% of the call, and the rest is
that's
like
true.
catching up on our families and what we've been up to and this weird thing we found, or this thing that we're trying, or, you know, something that's, I don't know, something that's kind of stressing me out, or whatever it is. And it's just, yeah, it's such a true friendship. And that's for sure been the best part of it for me. I wish so badly that I could just hand this guitar over through the screen to you, because
Yeah,
it's
grab
wild to
it.
me that it's wild to me that you just haven't played it.
It is. One day I will. But on the other hand side, of course, it's like amazing the chance we have right now through all this technology, and even talking to you right now, being able to do this stuff and developing friendship like that is just amazing, and I'm really
Absolutely.
grateful for that.
Me too. And I guess my last question for you is, you know, you yourself, I just love the guitars that you design and build.
Thanks.
Um, and I encourage everybody listening to this to check out Max's work, Heidemann Guitars, and on Instagram, it's his account is Noisy Shack.
Yes.
And I guess my last question is around, through this process, what's one of the most valuable things that you learned, and you know, is it something that you feel like you'll apply to your own designs, your own guitars?
Ah, well, first of all, thanks for mentioning my little work. I'm pretty much like a weekend guitar builder or something. It started out like a little hobby for me, and I started to put it online on Instagram and stuff like that. And I'm glad people noticed it.
They're
And
really such great guitars, and yeah, I really encourage everybody to check them out. They're really special.
thanks. I think one of the main lessons that I will take out of this is taking existing concepts and looking at them from a totally different angle. Like, first of all, it's the combination of working inside a certain box with certain limitations. I'm one of those people who believe that limitations can greatly benefit creativity if you have to work within certain boundaries. And then taking a known concept, like for instance, a vibrato system, and applying just a tiny little twist to the concept, which in the end, like, sparks all this amazing new stuff you didn't even consider that would happen before. It's like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 is like when 1 + 1 equals a million or something, you know? You take like simple concepts, put them together, and try to make something that sparks interest in people and maybe sparks creativity. And I think what's true for both, like the guitars I try to make and the vibrato system on your guitar, we don't really have like a certain fixed concept in our mind of how this thing should be used and what kind of music should be played on it. I think we're both hoping that the person who gets to own this instrument would come up with fresh, new, inspiring stuff that none of us has considered before. And in the end, like the product ends up like transcending this initial little idea and becoming hopefully much more in the hands of somebody who feels inspired by it.
Oh, that's so beautifully put. Yeah, I think that's actually just a wonderful place to end off. So maybe I'll just say thank you to you, Max, so much, not just for this conversation, but for this whole journey, this whole process, this whole friendship. And I'm just so excited to put this very first issue of this vibrato system into the world. It's going to a young woman in the States who's studying music at an all-women's college, and I'm just so excited to see what what she's inspired to play with it.
Oh yeah, me too. That sounds amazing. Can't wait to hear what she comes up with.
Me too.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.